Hey kids, this is Brian. I'm here with my friend of several decades, David Carter. Hello, David Carter. How are you? You're doing good. Right. Oh, hold on. Uh, let's try that again.
All right.
Hey, this is Brian. I'm here with my friend David. David Carter. Say hello, David Carter. How are you today?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well,
Let's dance.
the reason why we're talking today is I've watched a lot of these kind of things, of course, and I've done this for a while, and I haven't done like a musical artist sort of chat with a dear friend about somebody who we both respect and enjoy a lot. And after watching all kinds of people with their own version of this, I thought, why not? Why not try? So today, me and David are going to be talking about the career of the late lamented David Bowie, the thin white Duke himself. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is just saying that when David Bowie passed away, it was profoundly shocking for a lot of people because he was always there, and it kind of seemed like after he did pass away, that it almost seemed like the world just kind of went to shit. It almost the joke was that David Bowie somehow was keeping the forces of the universe at bay, the balance between good and evil. And then once he was gone in a physical form, the world just went to shit. And I know that's not true, but is it? Is it not true? I don't know.
It's a bad start to a bad year.
Yeah, and that was what year was that? Was that 2016?
Yeah.
Okay, it was 2016. And the reason why I remember that is because his final record, Blackstar, came out. It was released the weekend before he passed away. And before it actually came out during the weekend, I guess he brought his video for the song Blackstar out, right?
Yep.
And I remember watching that and just going, why is this really good all of a sudden? Because and this is just my opinion, and I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. And just because it is my opinion, it doesn't mean that it's more important than anybody else's. But I'm of the firm belief that David Bowie hasn't really recorded a really decent record since 1979, Scary Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that later, but all of a sudden Blackstar came out. The video was really cool. The song was really cool. It just reminded me of all the right things that he used to do so effortlessly. It didn't seem like he was trying. And suddenly it just seemed like it was really good and artistic and weird, which is like the three things I always associate with David Bowie, no matter what kind of phase he had gone through, in his ever-shifting career, at least, the 70s period. Did you feel that same way, David, after you heard Blackstar for the first time, or even have you heard it, or did you see
Oh,
it?
yeah. Because you and I had gotten together for beer or coffee or something right before the news broke that weekend before he died. And you were telling me about it, that you had already listened to it. And my brother had gotten it for me for my birthday, and I hadn't gotten around to listening to it yet. And because I'd kind of had the same experience as you throughout since 1980 or so, that, it was uneven, to say the least, how my response to the output after that time. So yeah. I was glad to hear that you were impressed.
I was really impressed right off the bat. They were like, the song Blackstar, there was a song called Sue that was amazing. There's a song called, I think it's a pity she was a whore.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was good too, but yeah, it just seemed really strong. And then, literally it was that weekend. I guess that was when we had the beer, as you were saying. But then on Monday, woke up and he was dead. Yeah. It was like, fuck. And then later, as time went on, you realize that he had meticulously orchestrated this record to coincide with his departure, whenever that would be,
Yeah.
which is pretty fucking amazing, all things considered. He literally turned his life and death into art. And I'm sure I'm wrong here, but I can't really remember any artist, any musical artist that knew his time was running up, going to those lengths and orchestrating, such a thing, And, the response of his death was, of course, globally felt and very widespread, and slowly but surely people realized just how much work went into him doing the final record and leaving all these little clues about mortality and stuff. And, so I think the only difference was because I did have the record, and I'm not saying this like, I heard it before he died, but I was able to form an opinion without what eventually happened, which is all the difference in the world. It was like, well, this is just a really good record. This is the best thing he's done since Scary Monsters. And then, that was it. But I remember that week when he died, it was kind of upsetting, to actually feel weird or bad about somebody who you just didn't know, who was an artist, and still just, I feel like whenever people pass away, we're actually just mourning ourselves, because that's inevitably going to happen to me and you and everybody, So I feel like when people do that stuff, to some degree, they're also mourning themselves. And there was a lot of mourning going on that week. I remember talking to you and calling a few people, and like a friend of mine named Chris Sherry, who lives in California, and we were bummed out. It was it seemed like it kind of affected me in a way that stuff doesn't usually affect me. I think maybe John Candy and Freddie Mercury were the only two people whose passings I really did feel, oh man, not like I was happy about anybody else, but it just sort of had an impact. Did you have any similar feelings or thoughts about that? Because I know David Bowie loomed very large in your life ever since I can remember meeting you, which was got to be like in the late 80s, really.
Yeah, 86, 87, something like that.
Yeah.
It was such a weird time for me, because I remember waking up and a friend of mine had texted me that David Bowie had died. But the weird thing was, my mother was, fine now, but really sick and in the hospital at the time. I can't remember what was going on, pneumonia or something like that, but really, really sick. So that's what I was dealing with that weekend. And so it's like the news was just kind of hit me as this awful news, but I had to go on to more immediate things in my life to deal with. So it kind of sank in gradually. But I can remember, maybe I was driving to work or to the hospital or something, but I remember having gotten the news, the only thing I wanted to hear was Bewley Brothers.
Off of Hunky Dory. The last song.
Hunky Dory. So for whatever reason, it's a great song, but why I associated that with his passing, and just, that's how I needed to acknowledge it. That's how it was.
Right. How did David Bowie come to you in your life? Do you have a story about being introduced to his music? Anything like that you might care to share before we go into his discography and talk about his various records?
I really can't remember exactly. I think it was probably, the first thing I encountered was probably Changes One.
Yeah.
My brother worked at Record Bar. I don't know if Record Bar is still a thing or if people around the country know about it. But anyway, a chain record store. And so and he's a little bit older than me. And so I think he brought that into the house along with, I don't know how much he liked it, but I remember I liked it. And I remember also the Cat People soundtrack he really liked. He liked Putting Out Fire, the Giorgio
Yeah,
Colonna stuff. Mhm.
right.
So that I must have been maybe 11, 12, something like that.
Right. Um, do you recall what the first David Bowie record you bought was?
I'm sure it was Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah, right.
And after that, Lodger.
Okay. That's cool. I think my story about being introduced to him was he always seemed like he was around, but the first song I really noticed, and it was after it came out, was the song Golden Years, actually, from Station to Station. That was a single, and it was a big, I mean, I'm not sure if it was a hit, but it was that song and Fame, those two songs, you know? So I guess we're talking 1975. So right before me discovering rock music, I guess. And I remember hearing Golden Years and just thinking, what a weird song that is. You know, it's just, I mean, you know, I'm 8 years old, or I guess, or something like that, maybe 9. And here's Golden Years all over the radio. And I'm just, I really liked it, but there's just something really weird about it. Just, I mean, of course it was weird. It was completely different than probably, you know, the majority of what was going on back then. I remember taping that off the radio and just listening to it over and over and just thinking, what a weird song this was, you know. And you know, and then Fame. And I remember watching Soul Train because David Bowie. I remember watching David Bowie, lip syncing to Fame on Soul Train, and I was really confused because, and this is just what I thought back then. I just thought, why are they allowing this white person on Soul Train? That's anytime they had white people on Soul Train, I'd always be like, is that allowed? Is that, you know, because before I heard rock and roll, any music I heard and liked was basically done by black people, non-white people. You know, I wasn't, you know, I knew about the Beatles, but, you know, I had heard all the Motown stuff and, you know, Earth, Wind and Fire and Casey and the Sunshine Band. I remember that was confusing because Casey was this white, well, not white, but yeah, white, you know, Cuban guy. You know, I just assumed he was a black person. You know, I was like, oh my God, you know. And my line of thinking back then was, are these people allowed to do that? Is David Bowie allowed to be on Soul Train? And I just remember thinking that was during his super skeletal, the concentration camp victim look he had, like the cover of David Live, where he looks like a corpse propped up in a suit. He's just like, give me a meal, please. But anyway, and then later when I got into rock and roll, I really didn't get into David Bowie except for Ziggy Stardust, because Ziggy Stardust had Mick Ronson, and it was the most rock and roll David, as far as I knew back then, you know. So I knew that, but I didn't really know about David Bowie till really probably after I moved here, like in '86. Then I was around all these people that had great record collections, and then one by one, I realized the genius of all of it. You know, Hunky Dory, Man Who Sold the World. I mean, these records came to me late, but I was, you know, and they were all good. You know, Diamond Dogs, everything. I think that David Bowie has, like, probably next to, I mean, this is just personal taste, but next to somebody like Neil Young, not your favorite artist.
No.
But he just had, like, they both had really consistent releases in a 10-year period. David Bowie more so than Neil Young. There's probably a few other people I could think of, but you know, he came to me later, like a little bit later. You know, I wasn't walking around with a copy of Low in elementary school, but Kristen did. That was I think that was her first David Bowie. What was your first David Bowie record? Low. Why'd you get that? Because, you know, you couldn't really hear music back then. You just looked at the cover and went, oh, you know, if you didn't already hear about it, you take a chance. And she just was like, oh, well, it just looked really weird. So
it's a compelling cover.
Yeah, it's like kind of disturbing, you know. There's just something very alien and off about David Bowie in general. But when you're a little kid with no life experience, you know, he seems that much more weird and that much more strange, I guess. You know, so really it was just Ziggy Stardust, and then later, a little bit later on in life, when I went through the punk rock thing and went back to everything I missed, there was about 7 or 8 records that one after one, I was just, oh my God, you know. So that's pretty much how I got into him. And then by the time I met you, I can't say I was like really catching up with what he was doing, because I don't think I really liked what he was doing. It was during, like, you know, I wrote down, actually, I don't know when any of the records he did in the 80s onward came out, so I had to write down the order plus the year, because like the 70s stuff I know, but all the 80s stuff and beyond, I just don't know. So by the time we had met, he was doing what was it, the Glass Spider tour? You went to that show?
It sure was. That was maybe 1988 or 89. I can't remember exactly the year, but I did go. It's the only time I ever saw him live.
How was it? Too theatrical?
It was very theatrical, a lot of props. You know, he came out in this kind of, I don't know, kind of steampunk sort of swing contraption. I remember that. And I mean, my seats were so bad. It's hard to really go into detail about it. I do remember being pleased that he was going over a lot of the old material, mixing it in well with that album. What was that album called? Time Will Crawl.
Time Will Crawl.
Never Let Me Down. Never Let Me Down.
Time Will Crawl as we listen to Never Let Me Down. That's 87.
Yeah.
And you saw him with Peter Frampton on guitar.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how much I would have enjoyed seeing. I usually don't go to, I don't have a history of going to big rock shows, so I don't know. I don't know what I would have thought. I know I didn't go, but anyway. Well, getting all of our personal connection to David Bowie out of the way, do you want to start off with his I'm going to start off with Space Oddity.
All right.
I'm not gonna try to go down and say what our favorite records are, because we didn't have time to prepare. I just thought it'd be fun just to go down each one, just give our thoughts about it. And I guess we'll start with Space Oddity, just because that was his breakthrough sort of hit single, cashing in on current events of the day. And then after the song became a hit, I could be wrong here, but I think they quickly assembled an album to put out. And I'm not going to go through anything he did before this, because I'm not really that familiar with it. The only thing I was familiar with was that song, The Laughing Gnome, which is a good footnote of a joke. And I don't really know who Anthony Newley is, so I can't really comment on what he was doing. Are there like a bunch of hidden 60s gems that David Bowie recorded and I just don't know it, David Carter? Or
the only other song I remember from that kind of early pre-Space Oddity stuff that Decca or someone put together after he got famous, there was a song called Please Mr. Gravedigger that I'm not sure what he was trying to do. It was along the lines of that kind of, I don't know much about Anthony Newley either, but it must have been I guess sort of, I don't know, theatrical performance sort of songwriting where you're taking on a character and that sort of thing.
Grandiose.
Obviously, which obviously kind of bled into what happened later on with Ziggy and everything like that, but in a more sophisticated form than Please Mr. Gravedigger. And When I Live My Dream, that was another song that was just kind of a cute, basic love song, I think.
Right. Well, Space Oddity is an album. How is it? How is it one of your favorites? I I'm not going to add a whole lot to this because I've never really owned the album. I've heard it and just was like, eh. Um, some people probably love it. What are your thoughts on the album Space Oddity?
I like it. Here's my thing, and this is going to be the case with every single album that we talk about. There is rarely something not to dislike on every single album. I think that's what's great about him. You know, he's consistently almost totally excellent, but there's always something in there that will get on my nerves, or I just don't get it. And Space Oddity is like that. It's a great song. There's songs on there like Letter to Hermione, which is a nice kind of melancholy love song. Those really long, sort of almost Jethro Tull-esque songs toward the not Savior Machine, what is it? Signet Committee that goes on for about 10 minutes and a lot of mythological sort of inferences there. It's all pretty interesting, and it only at certain points gets silly. There's a song, Don't Sit Down, that it's like 30 seconds long, and he just kind of cracks himself up with it and leaves that on the record. So
it's that English sense of humor.
Yeah.
That jaunty English sense of humor. So Ziggy Stardust, not Ziggy Stardust, excuse me, Space Oddity as an album is all right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next record, I believe, is The Man Who Sold the World, which I think that came out in 1970. And that's kind of like his heaviest. It's after he met Mick Ronson. Yep. I think Woody Woodmansey, is that his name?
Yep.
He's drumming on it, and Tony Vincenti is the bass player and producer.
Yeah.
And I know that basically Mick Ronson had a huge hand in the music, and even though they were David Bowie songs, I think that's a tremendous record and one of my favorite David Bowie records that he's ever done. And I also think that it's weird how it almost sounds like David Bowie fronting the best Black Sabbath record you've never heard, but without Black Sabbath, and instead with Mick Ronson, pulling out all the stops. It's a crazy sounding proto metal early 70s English rock record with crazy bass playing and just amazing guitar playing, and the songs are all good. His lyrics are apocalyptic and really weird. And I never heard, that was another record I didn't hear until later in the 80s. And I was floored by that record. I still think that's one of his best records. So many good songs, Width of a Circle, such a weird, long song. All the Madmen, even Black Country Rock, the T-Rex ripoff song is pretty cool. She Shook Me Cold, the Supermen, the title track. I can't say enough good things about it. The Strange cover that was pulled of him looking like Lauren Bacall wearing a dress. I mean, I guess that was pretty button-pushing stuff, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on The Man Who Sold the World?
I love it. I can't remember when I first encountered it. It must have been around that time, maybe 86, 87. And of course, all I could find, all I knew of was the third cover, it's kind of the lamest one. That's just kind of a still from Ziggy Stardust, the movie. So it's
the black and white picture of him doing the weird guitar thing with his foot in the air. Yeah.
I think the first time I saw not the original cover, but the cartoon cover, which is probably my favorite, was you had that. I don't know where you got it, but
there was actually a fourth cover too.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, but I can't really explain it. It's also really weird looking and weird looking in a not very good realized way, like a lot of those covers.
Yeah, it's unsettling.
Yeah, well, the cowboy cover is that's kind of my favorite one too. The other ones, it's a beautiful photograph, and I guess pretty shocking or whatever it is that was supposed to be like. But anyway, the album sank without a trace.
Yep. Which is really strange. It's definitely an excellent record that's unlike anything else that he put out, just in terms of heaviness. But it's also very literary, which you can see throughout his career. So it's you can see where he's going and also see where he's experimenting.
Yeah. There's a lot of it's a very dense album musically and lyrically, and it just happens to be the heaviest record he did, and it's almost like a brutal proto heavy metal record, really, with David Bowie singing in front of it, and his strangely mixed acoustic guitar, which seems kind of funny in the place of some of those songs when you got the other guys, but it still kind of works. But I love Man Who Sold the World, and I always will. Coming up next, Hunky Dory. That's another great record. I like every song. I don't think you can like every song, but I think the spread of it, how weird it is, how much variety it is. That's like his first truly great songwriter's record. Like this is somebody that knows how to write really good songs and gets it done. I've read enough about that record where he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and it was all the Spiders from Mars band people plus Rick Wakeman of Yes playing piano. I think Trevor, what's the bass player's name? Trevor
Boulder.
Trevor Boulder replaced Tony, who quit or whatever. And that's a fantastic record. Like half the record are like some of his best songs. Like Quicksand's a great song. Life on Mars is a great song. You can't really fuck with Hunky Dory because it's just like, it's almost like his ultimate songwriter's album. I think the only song you don't like is Song for Bob Dylan because you don't like Bob Dylan, right?
Yeah, I don't see a need for a song for him.
But it's still a good song. Queen Bitch, every rocker likes that song, of course. Yeah. I even like Kooks. Is silly. That's like his silly English whimsical song, telling his child to stick with me and your crazy mom because you don't really have any choice really because you're a baby, you're an infant, but we're all right or whatever it is the song is about. But
it's an interesting message. You're stuck with us. You could be stuck with worse.
Yeah. Did we leave any other songs out? Changes, great song.
Changes is an iconic song.
You probably don't have to hear it again. It was in this Fast Times at Ridgemont High movie.
Yeah, it made tracks. It was hard to escape from, like a few others that I'm sure we'll talk about that kind of. Sometimes I just have to fast forward, not because they're bad songs, but just because, oh my God, they're oversaturated.
Changes is definitely one of those oversaturated David Bowie songs. As great as it is, and it's a great song. It's like listening to Stairway to Heaven, but not as, but in my opinion. But Hunky Dory, great record. Will probably always remain great.
What do you think of Bewley Brothers? Because I honestly don't know why it resounded with me so much at that time.
Well, it's creepy, and it has the weird ending of the sped up voices, and I can't really tell what he's singing about. But the band Saccharine Trust took their band name from the lyric in there. That
I never made that connect. Oh my God!
Yep, Saccharine Trust took their band name from that David Bowie song. I think that's a good song and a great way to end out the record. I like the song Andy Warhol too. I think that's really, there's something I like about him just sort of like pandering to all these people that he wants to meet and have them be impressed with him. Like, so, well, I'll write a song for Bob Dylan. I think I'm going to write a song about Andy Warhol. I'm going to write my tribute to, I've always heard Queen Bitch was like a tribute to
Lou Reed, Velvet Underground.
Right. I even read the other day, somebody on the internet wrote this stupid article about the time when David Bowie met a Lou Reed imposter. And it was Doug Yule, the maligned final bass player for the Velvet Underground, who I'm a fan of, actually, who always gets shit on no matter what. And there is a story about him actually, David Bowie seeing who he thought was the Velvet Underground after Lou Reed had quit. And he wasn't there, and Doug Yule was, so he was talking to Doug Yule thinking he was Lou Reed. But the tone of the article was like, Bowie tries to talk to Lou Reed impersonator slant, just the way things are worded on the internet. But I that's beside the point. But I do like the fact that he just went out there and just tried to really pander as hard as he could to these people that he wanted to get to know, and that nobody really knew of. Bob Dylan aside, but Andy Warhol, he's not really a household name, I don't think. I could be wrong, but I was what, 4 years old. I can't really say for any certainty, but but just the way he would kind of pick these subjects and write these songs to, when I say pander, I mean that in the best way possible. I don't mean that like that's a bad thing. I just think that's pretty forward thinking of somebody to like have I'm going to write a song about Bob Dylan and write about writing a song about Bob Dylan, and maybe one day Bob Dylan will hear it. And here's a song about Andy Warhol. Maybe Andy Warhol will hear it. Well, Andy Warhol obviously heard it, and a lot of people heard it. But I kind of like the other thing about David Bowie's songwriting is like it's no secret that he was famous for just absorbing what he could out of anything he encountered and picked out the strongest, best bits to emulate and just combined everything into this weird mash that was David Bowie's songwriting. And Hunky Dory is definitely the first example of him doing that, I think. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
And not only musically, he's paying tribute, I think, to a lot of, in Hunky Dory, to, personalities like Dylan and Andy Warhol and, a lot of literary figures, Crowley, and Quicksand. So he's
Greta Garbo.
Greta Garbo, yeah.
Garbo's eyes.
He's
Church
bringing
Garbo.
all of his influences in and all of his preoccupations in, and it just makes for really rich lyrics, I think.
Yeah, he's a good lyric.
It sends young people who hear it, like us, into these different. Well, we want to find out what the hell is he talking about, and so
Totally.
we discover a lot through him.
Yeah, him and Iron Maiden. Because when I was a kid, they'd write about history, and I'd be like, "Alexander the Great, murders in the Rue Morgue. What's that about?" I'm gonna look up what the Ides of March. What's that? Oh, okay. Writing or even Rush. So David Bowie, Rush, and Iron Maiden. You taught me a lot about life events and history. So thank you so much for that.
I graduated from the School of Bowie.
That's right. Okay, well now we're up to Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I don't even know really where to start with this one. But it was really the only record I was familiar with when I was really into Kiss and Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and stuff like that. It was like the only record that seemed to make sense in the pile next to all those records, because it was just a really good, glittery hard rock record with really good songs, good performances, and had a huge impact. And it was all done by a guy who refused to tour by anything else other than being in a goddamn boat. He wouldn't even get into a goddamn airplane, as Lester Bangs once said.
Mm-hmm.
He became this massive success. First, they acted like he was famous, but he wasn't. What was the name of his manager that he had?
Freeze.
Tony DeFries.
Freeze, wasn't it?
Right. And they were able to secure this huge, I guess, a huge budget to do whatever they wanted to with RCA Records. I guess that was Tony DeFreeze doing. I could be wrong. So for all the 10 people who might know more about David Bowie than us, you don't have to correct us. We don't truly know everything, but I think what happened was, they were just getting ready to unleash his Ziggy Stardust character in that record, and they were just working toward doing that. And they just made it seem like he was a much bigger star until he was in a very short amount of time. And I've read plenty of stuff about people seeing him, people that lived in England seeing him on television for the first time, and just how utterly weird and alien it was. And he just challenged a lot of people's notions of music, lyrics, sexuality, all kinds of stuff. Like he was a real pre-punk rock Pied Piper for a lot of disenfranchised kids and people that maybe didn't even know they were feeling the way they were feeling. Does that make sense?
I think so. He was just such a trailblazer, maybe not even musically, but because he had a lot of he wasn't doing any of that alone. He had a lot of geniuses with him, but just in terms of putting together a milieu and creating something larger than life out of what he was doing, as a way of really, I think, consciously trying to push the culture forward into not just the rock culture, but culture in general forward into something more interesting and open and fun.
I agree with all that.
And thoughtful. He had a real intellect that he allowed to play out, not just in the music, but in his persona.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have no idea what it would have been like back then, I was so young, but I imagine it was revolutionary. And like almost every punk rock person I've ever met that got into punk rock came from being a fan of stuff like David Bowie to a T. There was almost none of them. So he really blazed trails with the Ziggy Stardust character on that album. And the band was like a ferocious, great rock band. All those songs are so good. Everything Mick Ronson plays is so good. The other guys are good. They really knocked it out of the park. It's a record you can still listen to now, and it sounds as fresh as it did ever, except it is sort of the record I don't seem to reach for that record as much as some of his other records, but it's a great record.
It's an experience in and of itself. It really is what a concept album is supposed to be. It's something you just want to take time with and listen to all the way through. I've always wondered, if you know of them, what you think of the outtakes that were included, I guess, in
Man to Sell the World Ico version.
Yeah. Like Sweethead and Velvet Goldmine and that stuff.
Those are good songs. And there's another song, Bombers. Isn't that from Hunky Dory? That's a really good.
Yeah.
And then there was The Prettiest. Is The Prettiest Star? Is that on Aladdin Sane, or is that
It's on Aladdin Sane.
I think there was like a version with Mark Bolan playing guitar. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
That might have been on one of those Ryko records. But yeah, all the outtakes are really good too. Sweethead, that's a good song. Yeah. It seemed like he really knew what he was doing. And I think him and that band and that period, along with maybe Alice Cooper, that was probably very profoundly shocking for lots and lots and lots of parents in a pre-Kiss kind of world. I mean, especially because, like Alice Cooper is shocking for sure. But maybe it's a little less shocking in terms of people with their sexuality and the roles that they would end up playing while they're trying to figure out, who do I like or whatever. And David Bowie, You know, he certainly mixed it up. And I'm sure that was a huge threat for a lot of people. I'm sure it was like a saving grace for some people, and I'm sure it was just utterly alien and bizarre for a lot of people. Like my dad hated David Bowie, and I think
Is
a
that
lot.
right?
I think so, but I think a lot. Maybe he ended up liking him later, but I think at first, especially like he might have watched that Soul Train thing with me, and he just hated him. He was just he was just so weird looking to him, and just so whatever. You know, I don't know. Um, I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way about the Ziggy Stardust period and just him in general. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. A lot of thought went into the creation of all that. It's like everything that he had learned culminated in him and his manager getting together to do this thing, create this character, and it paid off big time.
Yeah, I think probably what was for a lot of people so liberating and for a lot of people so threatening was the fact that he just seemed so completely shameless about anything that he did. He just he didn't feel that he had to justify his appearance, his sexuality, his music, anything. He just kind of kept it real.
Right, with this intelligence, intelligence behind it, behind every move. So yeah. And then you got the song 5 Years. What a great lead off track.
Oh yeah.
That's like the perfect setup, even when it comes in with Woody's drums and that deliberate drum beat that I think never changes, and then just one great song after another, and they're all like 3 minutes long, more or less. It's just bam, bam, bam. So yeah, no complaints at all for Ziggy Stardust, but maybe not the record I'm going to reach for first, but I could always, anytime I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's a great record. That's a great period. And then they added Aladdin Sane, which is the next record. And I find that to be sort of a problematic record. I like half of that record a lot. The other half, I just think it's too forced sounding. You know, the songs I like Watch That Man, which is a great Rolling Stones ripoff.
Mm-hmm.
I like the song Cracked Actor, of course. It's a Mick Ronson tour de force. What else is on that record? Drive-In Saturday, I like that song.
Time, I've heard you
make fun of it.
Feelings about.
Tom has some of the worst lyrics he's ever written. It's so dramatic and stupid. And I think a lot of the stuff I don't like has, and it's nothing against him at all, but I think the Spiders from Mars added a piano player. His name is Mick. Is it Garson? What's his first?
Is it Mick Garson? It's something Garson.
Garson. Anyway, and Mick Garson is a brilliant piano player that overplayed over everything, which I guess is what David Bowie wanted. So to me, he really stuck out like a sore thumb. Oh, Panic in Detroit. That's a great song. So I think it's half good. I think the other half is trying too hard, and there's just too much of that winkly tinkly overplaying from the great Mick Garson.
You don't like Gene Genie?
Oh, I love Gene Genie.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't like the Rolling Stones cover.
Yeah.
Kind of like, it's a throwaway. And so that's what I think of Aladdin Sane. I don't have a lot to say. I like half of it, and the other half is like, any thoughts about any of that? Great cover.
I think it's the album that best kind of encapsulates to me that sometimes he's at his best when he's not so polished. And I think songs like Panic in Detroit, Cracked Actor, and Gene Genie are good because they're not trying too hard.
Right.
Lady Grinning Soul, Time
takes, what's the line? Time takes a cigarette and puts it in your butt. Is that what he says?
No, that's Rock and Roll Suicide.
Oh, sorry. I like my version. Time takes a cigarette and puts it in your butt.
He flexes like a whore.
There you
All
go.
swanking to the floor. That's poetry.
It's yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so we both sort of agree. Aladdin Sane, some fine moments, but maybe one of the lesser of his good period. Maybe
Yeah.
someone will disagree with me, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. Offer your opinions. And you know, I think Pinups, the oh yeah, he broke up the band in a real lame way. But you know, whatever, he's you know, that's his prerogative. And then I guess to serve as sort of a timeout, he did Pinups. And that's a record I really haven't spent. I mean, I've heard it, but I maybe I think the only reason why I can say I haven't checked it out in a dumb music nerd kind of way would be because I so dislike his version of the Rolling Stones song "Let's Spend the Night Together" that probably soured me in some childish way of ever checking out Pinups. Tell me about Pinups.
I love it.
Okay.
I think it's a solid good time. I think you would like it if
I'm sure I
you
probably
sat down with it.
just my childish opinions of you know I just haven't gotten around to checking it out. I don't know why. Like it took me like 30 years to check out Young Americans, and I checked that out before I checked out Pinups. Aside from a few songs like the Kinks cover and there's a few other songs on there. But yeah, I'm just not there. You know,
See Emily play.
yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's
Things.
Yardbirds
That's
cover.
probably my favorite on there.
Shape of Things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that record still has Mick Ronson on some of it.
I think so.
And then Mick Ronson went off and did this not very well orchestrated solo career
Slaughter on 10th Avenue.
and Play Don't Worry.
Yep.
And there was a handful of good songs on each of those records, but I guess Mick Ronson's deal was that he just wasn't a front person.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, Mick Ronson's great. But he was out. He was gone. They promised him a career and it didn't really quite take off. And he ended up touring with Bob Dylan. I don't know if you knew that, but there was a famous
No.
tour. Mick Ronson was the wild card of this tour. A movie just came out not too long ago about this period. It's not one of my. Remember we were talking about how hard Bob Dylan is to find an entryway. Like especially if you just can't stand his singing. Well, if you can't stand his singing, and you know that's going to be a little more important overall than how good your lyrics are. It's going to be kind of hard to find an entry into Bob Dylan. But anyway, this is one of the periods that I don't like from Bob Dylan very much. But Mick Ronson, for whatever reason, is there playing this kick-ass guitar and this weird band of strange people assembled. And then I think Mick Ronson went on and worked with Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople for a long time. And yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I guess he was out of the picture. And then next we get to the scariest album cover David Bowie ever had is the Diamond Dogs album. I love Diamond Dogs. And David Bowie plays most of the guitar on that record, if not all of it.
Yep.
And he does a pretty good job. There's no solos. It's nothing like Mick Ronson, whatever, but like that is like my favorite of the dramatic David Bowie. I think every song on that record is good. I think maybe I'm wrong, but you know, like the cover.
Well, I think you don't like 1984.
Oh no, I do like it.
You do like it? Okay.
Beware of the Savage.
You just don't like Tina Turner's version that I played you.
That's probably it. Maybe that was it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but props to Tina Turner for covering it. And also there's a punk band from San Francisco called Code of Honor who named their second album Beware the Savage Jaw.
Ah.
And that came out in 1984. And I'm pretty sure I didn't really know about. But I remember thinking, "Beware the Savage Jaw." What a weird title. And then that's from David Bowie, 1984. But yeah, I love Diamond Dogs. I mean, and that suit in the as the record starts the Candidate Sweet Thing suit.
Yeah.
That's like the best moment of the record, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah. And
It's mesmerizing.
We Are the Dead. That's a great song. 1984 is a good song. When You Rock and Roll With Me is a great song. It's almost like, it almost sounds kind of like a Stardust throwback a little bit. Maybe not so much in brute force, but just in terms of the grand, hey, we're all in this together, come on kids, kind of thing. But
yeah,
it's a very dark album. The cover is unbelievably terrifying if you're like a little kid. Way scarier than Kiss. He's Bowie as a dog. This is weird. What are you?
And the voice changes. In most of Diamond Dogs, he's deepening his voice and just sounding more malevolent and morose. And he doesn't have that kind of screechy English Duchess Ziggy Stardust falsetto that you're used to.
Well, this is a theory I have about that, because that's a very good point. It's like a point similar to when Nick Cave changed voices. Like there's a certain where Nick Cave did this covers album called Kicking Against the Pricks, which is a great record of cover songs. And I guess because all the covers were just different stylistically, he just sang in a deeper voice. And you're right. His vocals on that record are definitely deeper and more threatening. And the only person I can compare that to is, and this is somebody that he looked up to very much, is Scott Walker, the late Scott Walker. And Scott Walker was like a big influence on Bowie before Bowie became famous, And even stranger, it's like really Scott Walker that, like, during the period of time where I just wasn't interested in David Bowie, no matter how much I tried, I discovered the Walker brothers and Scott Walker, and like it was almost like Scott Walker stepped in to the spot where David Bowie once was, because I just didn't find anything interesting that David Bowie did for a really long time. Then I discovered Scott Walker, and it's like, this guy's amazing. And then I discovered that David Bowie loved Scott Walker. In fact, he was the executive producer behind the Scott Walker movie that came out a few years ago, before both of them.
I know that.
Yeah, so David Bowie's financially responsible for that movie, I think. We're pretty sure. But anyway, that's definitely the changing point for David Bowie. It's Diamond Dogs and his voice dropping, being more just, I want to say method actor. I mean that in a good way. Because like a lot of other great singers, David Bowie's really good at changing his voice to suit the song or the mood or the lyric. And there's some people that definitely are really good at that. He's up there with Rob Halford of Judas Priest and Robin Zander of Cheap Trick. Those guys are method actor singers. They change their voices to fit the tone of what the song calls for.
Yeah, another one, Prince, does the same thing. Yes.
And I'm sure there's a lot more, but those are the guys that come to mind right there. But Chant of the ever-changing skeletal family?
Chant of the ever-circling skeletal family.
Run.
Oh, God, it's so great.
Like, what the fuck is that? And then he gets a band together. And you know what? I didn't even write down Young Americans. We're coming up on that. I totally forgot it, which is not hard to do, I think. Yeah. But and I've only heard this record once, but it was the album David Live, and that was on the Diamond Dogs tour. And from all accounts, what I've read about that is that was when the empire was starting to crumble between him and his manager. And what worked on the album Diamond Dogs didn't really necessarily work in a live setting, right? So the money was running out, and then they cobbled together this album David Live, which has Earl Slick playing guitar, the first appearance of Earl Slick. And I haven't spent a lot of time with David Live, and that cover is really scary. He looks like a concentration camp survivor with a gaudy suit. He looks really skinny, and
yeah,
I think that kind of put me off too. Then when I finally heard it, it was just too campy and just, I don't know, it didn't do it for me. Are you a fan of that record?
I had it, and I had it for a long time, but I didn't listen to it a lot. And it's, if I remember right, it just went into a lot of unnecessary instrumentals, I guess. He was he was sick at the time. He was not all there, I think, and half psychotic from
Yeah.
cocaine. But
So
but it's
record
in the right mood. It's kind of a if you want to just kind of bathe yourself in a sort of creepiness, it's there for you.
right, but not necessary, probably.
Mm.
Like I don't think I'd reach for David Live instead of the 3 or 4 records that we have talked about or we're going to talk about. And that's sort of my opinion about it. It's like I don't need that. I don't need to hear it. So that brings us to Young Americans. His Plastic Soul, I guess the kindest way of putting it is like what they're trying to say is like read some Lester Bangs articles where he's like, well, he's just trying to be like a soul man or whatever. And I was really put off by all that cover, whatever. And the song Young Americans, okay, it's not my favorite David Bowie song. But then when I finally got around to hearing the album all those years later, I was like, well, this is a lot better than I ever would have thought. The reality of it was a much better record than the idea I had of it. In fact, everything on that record sounds probably better than the song Young Americans, but I'm still not super excited about Young Americans in general. I think better. Mm-hmm. He assembled all those guys that would go on to play a part in like what I think is coming up is one of my favorite periods, like Dennis Davis, the drummer, mm-hmm. George Murray, the incredible bass player, Carlos Alomar, guitarist. So those guys are all in place, I think, but it's not clicking with me as a listener, but it's still better than I thought. Any thoughts about Young Americans?
Well, not my favorite. I like Fascination. Fame is always catchy, always worth listening to. Young Americans is cute, but for the most part, I could, if I had to condemn one Bowie album from that period to the dungeon, it would probably be Young Americans. Although good things came out. Luther Vandross sang backup on that one, and Ava Cherry. And we should talk about the brilliant
record. Yes, the record that you played for me of her solo stuff that David Bowie orchestrated, and then it never came out because David Bowie, I guess, was no longer interested in her or the career of her.
I think so.
And didn't they cover some really bad? Wasn't there some really awful cover? Like, didn't they cover "Imagine" by John Lennon, or just something really terrible?
I think it was something like, maybe it was Imagine. I wish I had it next to me. I can't find it right now, but
the Beach Boys song, God Only Knows.
That's it. God Only Knows.
It was fucking awful. Boy, if there's an artist David Bowie should stay away from covering, it's got to be the Beach Boys.
But it's interesting. I've noticed that some stuff that he did, or Ava Cherry did, who knows who had what kind of input, you can see coming up in later Bowie albums, like that song, I Am a Laser, which is probably, that's a good song off of that record, I Am a Laser, but it's basically Scream Like a Baby on Scary Monsters.
Scream Like a Baby. I think I remember that, actually. So he like retooled it. He did that in the later part of the 70s. He like gave people songs like he gave Iggy Pop's Sister Midnight for The Idiot, and that showed up as Red Money on Logic.
Yep. The
exact same music. So anyway. Okay, so we went through Young Americans, nobody cares. Now we get to the good stuff. All right. Low. Well, Low is a great record. I think during the whole Brian Eno phase of his career, where he teams up with Brian Eno and Tony Visanti again, It has Dennis Davis, George Murray, and Carlos Alomar. I think that's the period. That's actually, as much as I love Mick Ronson and Hunky Dory and The Man Who Sold the World and Ziggy Stardust, I personally, now, at where I am now, I think that's my favorite Bowie stuff, is these records that we're going to be talking about. Starting with Low, because like it's really uncharted territory. And yeah, you can talk about the things that were influencing David Bowie during that time and throw in the term krautrock or whatever, but like, I mean, who really knew what any of that stuff was in 1976, 77? You know what? I'm totally wrong. I jumped ahead one album.
Yes.
All right, let's go back. Station to Station.
That's right.
Yeah, sorry, everybody.
We skipped our golden years.
I did. I skipped. Okay, well, this is a good setup, though, for the Berlin period, because to me, it's almost the same thing, sort of. Earl Slick's in the band, playing guitar, Carlos Alomar, Dennis Davis, George Murray. Station to Station, great album all the way through. Flawless. Yeah. Lots of variety. Has the weird, dramatic, campy stuff. Has the sprawling title track, Golden Years, the song. And of course, one of his best songs of all time is TVC 15. TVC 15. That's one of his best songs ever. Any version of that song is great. It's a great record, great cover. So weird, you know, like he's, you know, 1976 is, you know, the era of Kiss and Aerosmith and disco and, you know, Bee Gees main course. And then here comes David Bowie, Station to Station. What a strange record to come out. And then his persona is the Thin White Duke persona. He's like obviously recovering from his hedonistic Los Angeles experience where he just stood off of eating insects and drinking milk, whatever the story was. I forgot what it was. But what a great record. Any thoughts on Station to Station?
I love it. And I also love the fact that it, you know, the genesis of it, it kind of comes out of the experience of being the man who fell to earth. The movie, you know, this is one of my favorite musicians and one of my favorite directors coming together on this project that is a reinterpretation of an actually really well-written, really good science fiction novel, but it's a completely different experience than that book.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, the strangeness of Station to Station corresponds really well with the strangeness of The Man Who Fell to Earth and was meant to be the soundtrack, or at least Bowie was approached to make music as, you know, to be the soundtrack of the movie. And for whatever reason, I can't remember now, it didn't work out. And it was John Phillips that basically
from the Mamas and the Papas.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the music he was working on turned into Station to Station. And
I think David Bowie won that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a great record. Well, I'm sorry for jumping ahead to Low. I actually wrote about David Bowie a couple of days ago and stuck it on the internet, and I forgot about Station to Station there too. I don't know why or how, but I did. But yeah, so Low. Great record. First side is all weird short songs. They sound weird. It's really uncharted territory. And then the B side are those long, moody pieces with almost no singing. And I like everything on side two. You know, it's a real jarring mix. And I think when these records started to come out, I think people were very confused. At least when I go back and read what people thought of him doing those records, starting with Station to Station. You know, it wasn't the kick-ass rock and roll of Ziggy Stardust, and it wasn't, you know, Young Americans or whatever. It seems like it's a completely different direction. And I like everything about Low. Covers, that's another throwback to the movie, right? I mean, so
yep.
What a strange cover. And then yep, there you go. But you know, there's like the instrumental songs that start off and the first side are really good. Breaking Glass, What in the World, Sound and Vision, those are all really great songs. What are your thoughts on Love?
Well, I love the whole thing too, and I think along with Station to Station and everything that we're going to talk about from here on in, there's the distinction for me is that a kind of introspection comes into what he's doing musically and lyrically, and does that make sense?
Yeah, he's rebounding. He parted ways with his manager. He went through this horrible time in Los Angeles where he lost the plot, and he's just sort of he's trying to bounce back. Takes Iggy Pop and goes to Berlin for whatever reason, which is a great place to go if you want to get away from drugs, I imagine. Works on his stuff, helps orchestrate Iggy Pop's first solo record, The Idiot, with a lot of the same people in David Bowie's band. And it's definitely, and even the title Low, that's probably, I imagine how he felt. He probably felt really super low, but it's a great record, for sure.
And Low's not all bad. Low profile. Just being low isn't necessarily being down in the dumps. It can be just kind of low key.
You're keeping things low. You're just like you're just that's actually what I was thinking. It was more like that kind of low versus I'm at rock bottom as a human being. I don't think he's at rock bottom as a human being. I think he's keeping things on the down low.
Yeah.
Plotting his next move, which is Heroes, the next record, which again, very similar to Low. Same sort of idea, songs on one side, moodier stuff on the other side. And Low has a couple of my all-time favorite David Bowie songs, and one of those songs is Beauty and the Beast.
Oh God, yeah.
That is one of his best songs ever. Everything about that song, the musicianship on it, and the bass playing. I'm going to say this again, George Murray, you are the greatest unheralded bass player of the goddamn universe on all those David Bowie records. Everything he plays is fucking great. He's an incredible bass player. And he retired after he stopped playing with David Bowie after Scary Monsters. But Beauty and the Beast is a great song. Heroes is still a great song, but that's also another song that I probably don't have to hear ever again. But it's a great song. His vocal delivery is amazing. Sons of the Silent Age is a great song. Blackout's a really good song.
Yeah,
so there's some
Joe the Lion. They're all
yeah. So I think I like Heroes just a tiny bit less than Low, but no complaints. What do you think of Heroes?
It's weird.
The cover. What's that?
It's some kind of eurythmic Steinerian sort of pose. It's this German philosopher.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to speak about it, but that's what I read somewhere. But I guess the thing about Heroes is it's probably the one I reach for of the Berlin period the least.
Same here.
Maybe it's because I get, the song Heroes is so over saturated and all over the place. But just every time I go back to the whole album, it's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah, I agree. It's just slight. I'm definitely not saying it's not as good a record. It's just the one record I just reached for a little less than the record that came out before it, and the one that we're going to talk about that came out afterwards, which we're going to go to now, which is Larger, which is a great record.
Yeah,
a great record. It has one of the most chilling songs ever written about spousal abuse, Repetition, which is really hard for me to listen to. It's so creepy. The way he sings it, especially when he says, don't hit her. It just makes my blood freeze or something. And there's this weird double bass thing that Dennis Davis does in it. Adrian Belew's on that record, but it's great song after great song and really weird, like African Night Flight. Like, how does he count in? How does he count into that? It's just so weird.
Yeah.
But Look Back in Anger, amazing song, great drumming. Every
Boys
song,
Keep Swinging.
Boys Keep Swinging. DJ. I remember watching a video for DJ, and again, my dad hated David Bowie, so I remember, like, he would release videos from this, and it really seemed like David Bowie was really out there alone during the, his time in popular culture in the late 70s, because what he was doing was so different than anything I was exposed to. Wasn't rock and roll, wasn't Kiss, wasn't disco. It just seemed like he was out there on his own, and he just made these videos for stuff from Roger, and DJ's on it, and a guy comes up and kisses David Bowie on the lips where he looks really disinterested. And I remember watching that with my dad, and my dad did not like that at all. And it was, you got to start somewhere with anything you're presented with. So it was kind of, whoa, that's kind of shocking. He doesn't like girls, or maybe he doesn't like guys either. Maybe what the hell's going on? The video for Look Back in Anger, that was really disturbing to me. Where it's like he's painting, and it's like you don't understand what's going on. All this like clay forms on his face, and he looks really demented and strange at the end of it. This is like 1978, maybe.
Yeah, the first videos that were ever really produced, the conceptual videos like that. And something's going on with he's in DJ, he's breaking his records, he's smashing mirrors, he's just kind of trying to destroy these images of himself. And you see that in the Look Back in Anger video. But then the Boys Keep Swinging video
very
is completely different mood. And it's
almost fun and joyous. He's just
it is. And it's also playing with that theme of kind of destroying the image, because when he's basically in drag, in those 3 different drag costumes, and he's wiping the lipstick off his face, which goes back to a really old tradition in drag, of German Berlin drag, where that's what the drag queens did. They came out and did their thing and destroyed the image. That was part of the
Boys Keep Swinging video.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Well, yep, that's a great record too, for sure. I'm going to touch base on the live album, which I really like from that period, which is David Bowie Stage.
Yeah.
I guess the band, obviously, they don't really do the Ziggy Stardust material in the same manner as Mick Ronson and the boys do, but that's my favorite David Bowie band, I think. Again, at the point I'm at now, like, because Dennis Davis is still there, George Murray's there, Carlos Alomar, and then you got Adrian Belew, who's a really cool guitar player. Everybody else in the band looks like there was no regard for any kind of visual continuity whatsoever. You watch any video clips of that 1978 tour from which the album Stage came from, they all look like people that just came from every walk of life thrown together into this band. And you got David Bowie dressed up like Pinocchio or something, and like that one German clip where it looks like Pinocchio. Like, only David Bowie can get away with dressing like Pinocchio in like a garbage bag pair of pants or whatever, and everybody else just looks so weird, and just it's like, what the hell is going on here? But I love that record, and that record also has, I think, the best version of Station to Station with Roger Utopia playing his masterful synthesizer and keyboard parts. But I like that record. I play it pretty constantly, actually. Live records aren't the most important thing, but I like that record. I don't know if you're familiar with that record, but
yeah, it had an impact. And I know that they used footage from that live show in the movie Christian F. I don't know if you ever saw that in that
I
movie
never
of the
saw it, but
heroin addicts.
I remember hearing about that movie, and I got it confused with this other movie called Times Square that was probably not as good and not as German, that came out a little bit later, involving, it was about some desperate female character, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Times Square was like a PG version of the movie you're talking about. But I didn't know that David Bowie was in it and that there was some live footage. So I knew that much. But no, I've never. Is it a good movie?
I think so. It's been a long time. I don't know if it's easy to find now or not, but I saw it sometime in the 80s.
All right. Well, we're gonna get to Scary Monsters, which finishes off the 70s. Another weird, ahead of its time record with weird videos. You know, like you said before, he was one of the first people to make videos. So the video from Ashes to Ashes, for example, what the hell is going on there? That's really strange. I mean, this is all before 1980. It just seemed like he was like ahead of the curve completely. Not for much longer though. He was on Saturday Night Live. That was a very strange appearance.
Oh, those are
Really,
fantastic.
yeah, all three of those clips, and they're just really weird. And he still had all those guys that played on his records.
Brought in Klaus Nomi.
Yes, and some other guy that's dressed just like him, but he's kind of like a dark shade of red instead of black. And they're doing TV C15, and they do The Man Who Sold the World, and then he's like, they superimpose his head on a puppet's body. That it's just so weird looking, you know.
So great.
I mean, context is everything for like stuff like David Bowie when he was like hitting, because you know he ended up doing the Elephant Man. I would have loved to have seen that. I've talked to one woman named Nancy that actually went and saw him do that and said he was absolutely brilliant, that it was fucking amazing. And I totally believe it too. And then, yeah, sorry, I was going to cut you off. What are your thoughts on Scary Monsters?
There's a lot of buried gems on there.
Yeah.
Scream Like a Baby. We talked about that a little bit before. Just the title song.
That weird accent he sings it.
Yeah, going into the Cockney character. So he's just kind of, and that goes back to some of the really early late 60s stuff that he was doing when he was employing that kind of persona.
Right. That's a cool cover.
Yeah.
Cover's really weird. And like I said, he went and did the Elephant Man. And then there was this period of time where after 1980, where I guess you just didn't really hear about him for a while. I don't know what he was doing. He's probably doing something. And then we're going to get into the second part of his career, which I consider everything after Scary Monsters the second part of his career, even though it's from fucking 1980, which is 20 years before the year 2000, and now we're 20 years past that. So my opinion here is that in general, I think David Bowie has, by his own high standards, this is just my opinion, and I'm not saying anybody has to agree with me. If you like all these records in this period, great, you know, good for you. But I just have this weird opinion that for 40 years, until his untimely death, with very few exceptions, there was just nothing I really liked a lot. And I'm going to try to figure out the positive things about this, because I don't want to sit here and talk about somebody I like a lot and just say that 40 years of his career sucked, because but there's this thing and I just can't shake it. And it starts with Let's Dance, which came out in 1983. And I think at the time he was all over MTV. China Girl was a big song. The song Let's Dance. Stevie Ray Vaughan played guitar on that record. Not that that matters too much to me, but that's how he got his first brush of notoriety. Quit the touring band at the last minute, from what I was told. And to me, it just seemed like a very cleaned up version of David Bowie. I think he also sort of said, well, I guess I'm not bisexual after all. I just said that back then. And it seemed like what he was doing was not trying to be cynical about it, was he just tried to make himself up to be like a regular guy with 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 a cool dyed blonde hair and cool guys in the band. And I know Nile Rodgers produced it. I know it was his record, but I'm sure I could find something about it that I like, but I was not super into Let's Dance at all. In other words, I didn't go back in time and discover Let's Dance and go, man, what a fucking great record. What are your thoughts on Let's Dance?
I liked it. I remember purchasing it, and there's a lot about it that really appealed to me. I love Nile Rodgers. I loved Chic. I loved the stuff that he did. Even Madonna's album that he did, I liked a lot. I think that album, Let's Dance, could have been better with given, how talented they both were. And I think, I heard an interview at some point with Nile Rodgers talking about it. And basically they were saying David Bowie approached him with, look, I want to make hits and you know how to make hits. And
Yeah.
so I think he had a picture or maybe a record cover of an old Little Richard album. And that was kind of the keystone of what they were trying to do. They were trying to make this polished, rock, appealing rock album.
Right. So
and they did it somewhat.
yeah. So even my dismissal of that period of that record, it was still this high concept that went into it between him and Nile Rodgers to make this commercially appealing, viable record that would hit all these markets and appeal to the new MTV generation and hopefully hold on to some of his older audience. And yeah, he was massively successful. It was a huge tour. I remember that. And I wasn't really listening to David Bowie seriously, even during that period. So, so I can't really sit here and say, well, that was a sellout record or whatever, or anything like that. I just know I just never really responded well to it. But I think if I went back and checked it out, I'd probably think that was probably the best record he put out during the entire 1980s, I would imagine. I could be wrong. But yeah, so I don't have much to say about that. And we're not going to be spending a lot of time on the rest of these records, I'm pretty sure. But I'm going to go through, we've been talking a long time, but let's go through them anyway because I wrote them down. The next record was Tonight from 1984. Anything you want to tell me about that? Because I remember the song Blue Jean, which is a good song, and I literally remember nothing else. Am I missing out on something if I don't check out Tonight?
The only thing there was Blue Jean, there was Loving the Alien, which is that's a good song.
Okay.
I don't like Loving the Alien. It's an interesting song. And then Tonight was a duet with Tina Turner. So I liked it.
Okay.
You can't, it's a ballad duet. It's fine.
2 or 3 songs. Do you have any thoughts about his next record, 1987's Never Let Me Down? I remember the cover. I have read interviews where he considers that to be his absolute rock bottom artistically.
And I was just lucky enough to see it live.
Last Spider Tour.
Yeah.
With Peter Frampton.
I know. I had it. I don't know what happened to it.
Don't remember anything about it.
I don't remember much about it.
Okay, well, that sounds like you're echoing David Bowie's thoughts about his own record. Now, here's my jump on point again. After finally going through the David Bowie portal, it was by 1980s. It was after 87. It's when he decided to do the Tin Machine record. And we lived together during that time. Do you remember how hard I tried desperately to like Tin Machine? How many hours we spent listening to Tin Machine and latching on to the 1 or 2 or 3 songs, with Soupy Sales Kids playing bass and drums. They were on Iggy Pop's records, and some new guitar player that overplayed on everything that's now in the band whose t-shirt you're wearing, Reeves Gabriel.
Yeah.
Right. I tried so hard to like Tin Machine, and I kind of succeeded, but I think there are a couple songs that the song Heaven is here, or that one. I just, and also they made a video for one of the songs on the record that featured moshers and stage divers. And I was like, oh man, like, you know, I don't know. It just seemed. Do you remember Tin Machine? Tin Machine even had a second album out and a live. Are you familiar with the entire Tin Machine back catalog, David Carter?
I had them all, but it was, this is where we had to make an effort. And there was so much other stuff coming along at that time. I think the effort just wasn't worth it at the time. It may be now.
It's kind of like for me when Kiss was my gateway rock band. By the time they first started to really lose the plot, there was like so much other great music coming out that was, hard to ignore. So they had to go in the background for a while. But Tin Machine, that album was released with 3 or 4 different covers of the same poses. And then I think a year later, everywhere I went, there were always 5 copies of the record used everywhere I went. So I guess most people sort of, it could have been good, I think, but I just didn't really like it. But I would say Tin Machine is probably, out of everything that we're going to talk about, is the only thing I really remember until Blackstar, honestly. Yeah. So having said that, you want to go ahead and just plow through these other records and you can tell me. Black Tie, White Noise came out in 93. Do you remember anything about that record? I know he covered a Scott Walker song. I've never heard
it. Which one?
Oh, fuck. Night Flights.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever heard the Walker Brothers album, Night Flights? It predates all the David Bowie Eno records by like a year or half a year. And the Walker Brothers were like Scott Walker and 2 other guys who were not quite as talented as Scott Walker or as visionary as Scott Walker. So the 4 Scott Walker songs are incredible. I think I might have played you a few of them. And they're really futuristic and weird sounding. And one of the songs is called Night Flights, which is the name of the album, I think. Night Flights by Walker Brothers. And that's the only thing I know about Black Tie, White Noise, is that David Bowie covered a Scott Walker song. And I've never heard it. And I think I've heard a few other songs from it. And just, Outside, 95. I bought that. That was like his record with Brian Eno. And I owned it. I had it for quite a while and played it. And I just, when you tell yourself that you should like something, but you don't, and you feel bad for not liking it, that's sort of the attitude I have for all these David Bowie records. That's 95. Did you buy Outside when it came out? Because of the Brian?
I had just moved to Boston. I was in grad school. I was really poor and just couldn't, I guess, talk myself into spending the money, and didn't know anybody up there who would have had it. So I never got around to it.
Got it. You want to know what the next record he did was that we don't know about? I wonder if we're going to get a bunch of shit from, man, you don't know Earthling and Outside? Those are his best records. It probably could happen. Earthling is the next record, 97. I remember that one because that's when he had the short red croppy hair and Union Jack jacket, and there was a lot of bass drums on it. And there's a song about being afraid of Americans. And I remember hearing some of that and just going, same thing. Like, I want to like this, but I just don't. Any thoughts on Earthling? Do you have anything about Earthling?
No, I think that's when a lot of the Trent Reznor influence came in, and I was nothing against Trent Reznor, but it's one of those things that just about everyone that I knew was really excited about, but it didn't resonate. Right.
Yeah. I think Trent Reznor is probably a very respectable musician that does stuff that's probably really interesting that I've just never bothered to check. I've just never paid any attention to him or 9 Inch Nails or anything. And I'm sure I probably could find something about him that I like, but it's one of those things. I don't have any excuses, but it's one of those things. But then the next record, David Carter, is 1999's Hours. Do you remember anything about Hours?
No.
Okay, moving along, 2002's Heathen is the next record. I remember the cover. I remember hearing a few songs. I remember reading that David Grohl was invited to play guitar on a song.
Mm.
And I have nothing against David Grohl as a person, but I think when you're like somebody like David Bowie or Mick Jagger, or you just don't have people like that playing on your record. That's some horseshit belief that is based in absolutely nothing. But I think actually just reading that he was on the record made me think it was going to not be good. And again, nothing against. I think I've never heard Heathen. What record I did hear was 2003's Reality, which had this pretty solid band. Earl Slick came back, I think, and they did a big tour. And that was when he had his health scare and just was like, man, fuck this. I've done enough. I'm happily married. I have a kid. I don't have to do this shit anymore. You know, I need to take care of myself. So Reality, I remember hearing some of that, and it's the exact. I mean, it was set up to where, like, you know, he looked cool, played this weird white guitar, chiseled features, great haircut, super cool looking band, various people, and I think there was a song called "Bring Me the Head of the Disco King," and I was like, again, this stems in me being outraged music nerd, finding fault in stupid things that nobody should care about. But I just bring me the head of the Disco King. No. But I remember hearing it, and it was the same thing. Do you remember?
Well, I don't think it's so much finding fault as it's just, you know, there's a disconnect between.
Is there? It's kind of like, that's the thing. We're talking about 10 albums after Scary Monsters at least, and I can't really find anything really great to say about any of them. And I would even say Young Americans and David Live and Aladdin Sane stomp all over all of those records. And I don't know where the disconnect. I know what you mean, but I don't know where the disconnect comes from. I don't know why I would think that, because like all artists change and grow. It really goes back to during all these wilderness years. That's when I got into Scott Walker, and Scott Walker had already done all the stuff that I thought David Bowie should have been doing in this fucking period, but he stepped back and let Scott Walker do it. You know, like Scott Walker put out The Drift, which is a fucking artistic, terrifying album. Until these really weird records that came out decades apart. And it's almost like Scott Walker filled the place that David Bowie vacated for me, while David Bowie did all this other stuff. And there was this huge disconnect.
But you know, that makes sense because what Scott Walker was doing was really daring, really challenging in a way that I think Bowie wasn't even trying. That's just not what he was about at that time.
Yeah. Because if you compare like some of the latter day Scott Walker stuff to some of the like Berlin era David Bowie stuff, and there's the same sense of pushing the envelope, but Scott Walker pushed it way further, even than, you know, like on some of Scott Walker stuff, they were like less about songs and more about like almost pieces and big blocks of noise, as Scott Walker put it. So that is probably my only way to really quantify the disconnect I have of all this stuff that David Bowie did. I'm sure I could find plenty of things on these records if I went back and checked them out. If I checked out Earthling or checked out Heathen, but like, there's just nothing about anything that makes me want to do it. It's almost like he had such an amazing period for so many albums that I'm not going to be too upset if I can't find anything. I mean, most people are lucky to have even one good record. David Bowie had what, 15 great records, 10 great, arguably great records, regardless of whether you like the style of music or not. So that could be it. But again, I can offer the Scott Walker as a replacement for David Bowie, but I don't really know outside from that why I just never was interested in anything he did after Scary Monsters until Blackstar. I just have no idea.
Here's my stupid theory. It's not as good as your Scott Walker theory, but that's a good theory. This is how I've always made sense of it. The stuff that we find so incredible, I think exactly corresponds to his marriage to Angela Bowie in terms of the timing from 1970 roughly to 1980. And of course they had this crazy relationship, and, you know, people had their feelings about her.
She's a real character.
Yeah, she's a real character.
She's a very powerful force. And I'm sure that of influence what David Bowie was doing, unquestionably.
Yeah. And that's when he was doing his, not that, you know, they were happily betrothed. I mean, it was probably on and off a nightmare for both of them, but that's creative tension sometimes. That's where it comes from. So that's my theory.
Yeah, he's obviously figured stuff out. He became more settled, and maybe, I don't know, maybe inevitably suffer if you're happy. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, who knows? I don't know. I mean, he seemed like he was pretty happy all along, but obviously not. So all these records that he did, he's probably pretty happy, and I don't like any of them, you know. we got two more, and I actually own this. This is it's the record The Next Day, which was the surprise record that came out in 2013. He assembled his band from, I think it was from the Reality tour, and they were told to keep it on the down low, don't tell anybody. He just decided he was going to make an album, and it has this weird cover where he's reenacting the Heroes cover, but it's supposed to be meaningful. Anyway, I listened to it like half a dozen times, and it's just the same thing. I just don't understand it. I want to like this. There's parts of it that are pretty cool. It sounds good. And there's a song called Valentine's Day that's supposed to be meaningful, and a few other songs. And I don't understand it. I just don't get it. But I still own it. I'm going to keep it, but it's like, I just don't like it. I don't know why. And the weirdest thing is the next record is with his last record is with a completely bunch of different people, and it's Blackstar. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like clearly the best thing he's done since Scary Monsters. And I heard, like I said at the start of this chat, I heard it and formed my opinion about it before he died. So I didn't have the baggage of him dying to form that opinion, because how else can you view this record in any other way? You know what I mean? So I formed it before he died. In the 2 days I listened to it nonstop and was like, this is what I've been waiting for 30 fucking years is Blackstar. This is a fucking great record. Everything about it's really good. The title track is amazing. He sounds better than ever. The band he's assembled. The saxophone, I can, if there's one complaint about it, I can, a little less saxophone, especially toward the end of the record, would have been just fine with me. I mean, that guy, whoever he is, he did a good job, but I don't think it's a real jazzy record, even though it was described as that. I think there's a lot of incredible drumming on it, bass playing. The songs are good. Sue, what a fucking great song. And even Lazarus is kind of like, that's like the hit single with the horrible video, artistically horrible video, and you know, as people found out later, like, yeah, Blackstar. I was like, I don't know. Again, we talked about the disconnect, and is it because he was recording it during this inevitably weird time of his life, where he has to really think about, you know, I could be dying here. You know, I'm making a record while I'm battling this disease that millions of people succumb to, and you know, I'm gonna turn this into my advantage. And it seems like he kind of did artistically, but what a fucking weird way to make an album, you know? Is that why the record's good?
I don't know. It's hard to know. I mean, it's you can't imagine that that wasn't a factor, at least the consciousness of, you know,
this could be my last record.
Exactly. But there's a kind of maturity to it that I can't help but feel like it would have been there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also seemed like he was trying a little hard.
Yeah.
And again, to anybody watching this that's listening to us bash 30 years of David Bowie records,
help us.
Help us. Yeah. Point is to the songs on these records where I'm going to go, that reminds me of something I would like from Diamond Dogs. That reminds me of something I would like from Station to Station. That reminds me of something I would like from Lodger. I don't find any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, help us. Because I thought Blackstar was tremendous, and then he died, and now the universe is fucked. It's been 5 years now. There was such an outpouring of grief from the entire world. And even people that hate David Bowie still had to give it up for him for just being a trailblazing weirdo that, you know, very smart man. I don't know. You know, there's a record that came out real recently that was an unreleased album, and me and Kristen listened to some of it the other day. It's called Toy. And I think it was recorded with the band he had during the reality period, and maybe the Next Day period. I could be wrong, but I think that's it. And I think it's like a lot of his 60s songs re-recorded with this new band. I think that's what I read. And I listened to it, and it was a little bit better. There's some a few interesting ideas. And I still was like, it was like a pleasant romp through something, but not, again, nothing like a 70s outfit. So you might want, maybe you might feel differently if you find it, but it's probably
I haven't heard it
it's
yet.
Called Toy. It has one of the worst covers ever. It's really
I like the cover. I have seen the cover and I like it.
Okay.
So we'll have, once I hear it, we'll have to talk.
Okay, we'll talk about that. But we went through all of his albums. That's a lot. I hope that if people listen to this, I hope they're at least kind to us about the disconnect we talk about, because it's nothing personal. There was nothing I would have loved to have done more than to have liked these records, but there was just always something keeping me from liking them. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I have impeccable taste in music. I'm just saying there was nothing about it that grabbed me in any way the way any of his 70s stuff grabbed me, or subsequently would grab me. There was like, either you get something or you don't, I guess. And I just, other than Blackstar, I don't know. And we already talked about the disconnect, and I gave you my Scott Walker theory, and I'm going to stand by that because that's a pretty good theory.
It is.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any final thoughts about David Bowie at all? How do you sum up David Bowie to like an alien that just landed on this planet? They asked about this artist named David Bowie. What was David Bowie? What did he do? Could you sum that up in a paragraph? Because he was a Pied Piper. I'll just start, and then maybe you can lead off. He was a Pied Piper, for sure. He was very intelligent. He brought literary influences and artistic influences into his music. Did a lot of name dropping, too. He was real smart. Obviously a very smart man. He changed constantly, almost throughout every facet of his career, which is commendable. There's a lot to really like about David Bowie as an artist, for sure. Even the wilderness years or whatever, there was something very futuristic about everything he did up until a point. He was a leader. Okay, here's the distinction between the 70s and beyond, and the 80s and beyond. In the 70s, he was a pioneer and a leader, right? But then in the 80s, he was not a leader. He was a follower. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's oversimplification, but there's something to it.
It's probably a real oversimplification, but he would go back to some of these themes and ideas that he already went through, and it seemed like he was almost like he brought up Trent Reznor, and it's like, well, Trent Reznor is doing a good current version of something that I used to do, so I'm going to look to Trent Reznor to tell me what's good and what's not good. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth. I'm sure it isn't, but that's kind of the vibe I got. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I probably don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know how I could sum him up.
All I know, I was bummed out when he died.
Yeah.
And it really did seem like he was holding the universe together with his mystic powers of something. Then the world just started, when David Bowie was alive, no pandemic. David Bowie dies a few years later, pandemic. Okay, well, okay, that's a dumb way. That's a dumb way.
He was our vaccine.
He was. Well, I want to say thanks, David, for talking to me for almost 2 hours about David Bowie. It's fun.
Absolutely.
We know what we're talking about, man. Well, we know for once. Well, we know to a certain point. And again, you'll have to, if you listeners actually make it through all this, and you want to set us straight about all the records that we've just counted, pick out some individual songs and send them or comment on them. And I want to like more of this period. I just, Scott Walker's hard to beat. So,
we'll stand corrected.
We'll stand corrected. All right, David. Well, thanks so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
It was, and I will get a hold of Toy, and we will talk soon.